What's going on, everybody? It's the Tyrant here, back with another exciting video of Resident Evil analysis. This time, again, we're going to be joined by the iconic HiddenXperia.
Thanks for having me on, dude. I appreciate it. It's good to be back again.
Absolutely. So last week, if you missed it, we have our Resident Evil 3 analysis. Today, we're going to be focusing on my game of the year for 2019, and that's Resident Evil 2.
Yep. My not just my game of the year, it was actually my game of the decade for last decade. I love this game like a lot. like a lot. So this should be a good one.
So I got to ask you the big question, HiddenXperia. Leon or Claire?
Honestly, I can't decide. I genuinely couldn't pick one over the other. Overall, I'd probably just say Leon. Just like a little bit. Only because Leon's story, like, post RE2 is more interesting than Claire's to me. But in RE2 specifically, I love them both. They're both fantastic. They're both played very well, acted incredibly. Their storytelling is really good. The chemistry between them is really good. They're both fantastic. In Resident Evil 2 alone, I could not pick one over the other.
That's fantastic. I have to say that both, you're exactly right. Both have their own unique stories with their own unique characters. You know, I'm a big fan of Ada.
Yeah.
And she is solely, like, I still can't figure her out. Like, who she really is.
And who she ultimately works for, because she seems to switch between, like, different allegiances the entire storyline. Like, she's always working for some other shady organization. Like, 1 minute it's Wesker, then it's like another organization, then another organization. It's like she doesn't really have allegiances to anybody. She kind of just does what she feels like in the moment or something. Strange.
she has a contractor position.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. She's a bioorganic weapon contractor. Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about the first act of this game. Now, what I love about Resident Evil 2 is they took some notes from Resident Evil Remake from 2001, or was it 2002? I think I'm...
2002.
2002? Okay. And that's the fact that they didn't take away from the story, but they added to it. Yeah. To actually beef it up a little bit, make it longer. And so one of the first instances where we actually get to see this is the opening sequence for Leon when he reaches the gas station.
Yeah.
Now,
it was
remember...
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. Now, if you remember from the original Resident Evil 2, this was basically just part of a cutscene where the truck driver's like, "Why'd he bite me?" And then it just continues to go on from there, and we never get to see anything like that again, except when we see a zombified truck driver drive that tanker truck right into Leon's car. And this time, they actually expanded on that. So what did you feel like when you actually had to explore the gas station for the first time?
I loved it. The intro to the original game was great, but it being like an entire cinematic and not actually a playable section made it feel a little bit disconnected. The game doesn't really start until you're in the streets going to RPD, whereas in the remake, the game starts long before that. Like, actually being able to explore the gas station, find, like, little traces of what's going on in the city, and then having to escape and then running into either Leon or Claire and being saved by them is cool. It was a very, very nice addition. I like it when games do that, especially remakes, when they take a section that could very well be a cutscene and make it playable. It gives you a lot more player freedom. It makes the game a lot more replayable, if you ask me. And it was handled like amazingly overall. I loved it.
Absolutely, it was fantastic. But I gotta ask you this: were you like me, and did you try to kill every zombie in the gas station, or did you just make a run for it?
I just ran. As soon as I saw the first door that you go through was locked in the freezer room, and I had to go back and go all the way around, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not killing these guys. I'm just gonna run.
And that brings us to the streets. You know, so this was the original opening for Resident Evil 2, the classic one in 1998, I believe.
Yeah, 8.
But in this one, it's a little bit different. So it starts you out, you know, you're in the crash car. You and, if you start out as Leon, you and Claire are separated. Well, I mean, you're separated regardless of who you start out with, but in this case, we're going to focus on Leon since we both sort of went towards that route right there.
Yeah.
When you start as Leon, it's a pretty direct shot to the police station, whereas if you went through on the original Resident Evil 2, you had to go through a bus, you had to go through the gun shop first. Now, they did eventually move those sections to a later portion of the game. My question for you is, was it better that they moved it later on, or should they have kept it at the beginning of the game?
I would have said maybe kept it, because the intro, that one section at the start is maybe a little bit too linear. Like, I don't really have an issue with it because it's very clearly funneling you towards the key part of the game, but it maybe felt a little bit too linear and almost scripted. Like, you run past the bus and all the zombies start falling out of it, and it's like, oh, well, that looks a bit scripted. That's not just happening randomly. And then when you go down the alleyway and then you come out, I think some more come out of the bus. I don't know. Overall, it felt a little bit linear, but I wasn't too bothered because by that point, I'd already played a section before the RPD. I kind of just wanted to get to the RPD. And I feel like if they'd made it a bit longer and a slight bit more open like it was in Classic RE2, then it maybe would have made the intro section drag on a little bit too much.
That's a good point. That is a very good point. Now, getting to the RPD, this was interesting to me. So this is where it really takes effect that the game is in third-person perspective instead of fixed camera angles and tank controls like the original Resident Evil. Now, let me ask you about this overall. How did you feel about this? Because going into the game, my skepticism was pretty high. Yeah. And it was mainly because they weren't going to remake it in the same fashion that they remade the original Resident Evil. And instead, they were going to do third-person perspective, which works if you have a more action-oriented game such as Resident Evil 4. Okay? But it took me a little off guard that they were going to do this with Resident Evil 2. That said, I feel like that they ramped up the action to match it perfectly. Would you have rather seen them do tank controls, or are you satisfied with a third-person perspective?
I was very satisfied with the third-person perspective, but now that I've actually played fully through RE1, I would have at least loved an option for tank controls. I know obviously that would have been basically impossible because designing a level and a map around tank controls is drastically different to designing it around a third-person camera, but I don't know, I feel like they could have done something maybe, because modders in the first like few weeks managed to recreate the tank control camera angles quite well. So I don't know, I love the approach they took, but the option to have both would have been great, I think, because they provide very different experiences. I think they really nailed the horror vibe with third-person camera, which is not easy to do by any means. When you can see not only so much in front of you, but so much behind you as well with a third-person camera. Nailing a horror atmosphere is a lot harder when you know what's coming up behind you, as opposed to like tank controls, where sometimes the camera angle is slightly obscured by like a piece of terrain or like a wall or something, or maybe even the player model, like when you can't see exactly what's behind you. But overall, I was happy with it. Honestly, they did it as best as they could, which sounds like I'm saying they did it badly, and they really didn't. It was done incredibly, but I don't know. I'm a massive fan of tank controls, and I feel like just having the option to have tank controls would have been great.
It would have been nice, and actually, if you could, if you can send me a link to the mod for it, yeah, I might actually do a playthrough on that as well, and I'll post it in, of course, the description below, so that you guys can try it out too. But I do miss the tank controls. I felt like it was really done well with the Resident Evil remake, the original one from 2002. Yeah, and definitely. It would have been nice to see that type of photorealistic environment. That said, they did a really excellent job with the third-person combat. I mean, I was wondering how that would play out, simply because there aren't as many zombies in Resident Evil 2 as there are plagas in Resident Evil 4. In Resident Evil 4, it made sense. In Resident Evil 2, I was pretty skeptical about it, but they did manage to pull it off, especially in a couple of segments, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But, all right, so let me ask you this. Does anyone know what started this? Original soundtrack or remastered soundtrack?
Oh, that's a hard one. I normally play with original. Purely, like, for no other reason than the main RPD Hall theme. I absolutely adore that soundtrack so much.
Yes.
To me, it has a lot more sort of like oomph to it when you walk into the doors for the first time and you see the entire hall, the massive statue, all the artwork and stuff. The original theme fits that more. That isn't to say that the new theme is by any means bad, because it's not. The new soundtrack was fantastic, but whenever I play RE2, I pretty much always do it with classic sounds and soundtrack, so I'm going to go classic.
Same here. In fact, when I did my full campaign and cutscenes video for both Claire and Leon, I used the classic soundtrack because to me that makes sense. One of my favorite soundtracks isn't just the police station, it's the marshalling yard.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds very cold.
It's eerie. Very eerie.
It is very eerie. Especially when you go back to the original Resident Evil 2 and you just see the dark city in the distance.
Yes.
And it just feels so cold and eerie, and it makes so well, which we'll talk about that in a little bit because they do bring that soundtrack back, but in a really odd place. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Yeah. I want to talk about the puzzles for a second for the first act of the game, because for Leon and Claire, they were largely the same, but they had different combinations.
Yeah.
What was your take on this? Now, would you have rather seen different puzzles for Claire than Leon? Because to me, it felt a little bit odd that, for example, when you're taking the medallions, all the combinations are different. And of course, if you played as Leon first and then you play as Claire, you still take the medallions, but the medallions should theoretically be gone at that point.
Yeah, so this is going to sort of open up the only issue that I had with the game. And it's more of an issue with the game because it's a remake as opposed to the game itself. But Leon and Claire, their stories were a bit too similar, like you said. And like, for example, the puzzles were a great example of that. They were a great example because they were basically the same thing, except like on the statues you just change the symbols around a little bit. They're a bit different. I would have liked a bit more different, more differences between the stories, I think. Because when you replay them back to back, they really don't feel as different as they should do. I don't think, and as well, it creates that sort of issue where you're not sure which one's canon. Like, is Leon A or B canon, or Claire A and B canon? I'm not actually sure which one is technically canon. I know there is one that's been
Leon, because he starts out with the gas station.
That's true. Yeah, it probably is Leon then. It probably is Leon. But either way, it does create that conflict where you're not sure which one is canon.
So we're going to move on to Act 2. I think this is Act 2. It's really hard to tell because the game is... The first half of the game is basically set in the RPDs. So I'm going to say Act 2 starts when Mr. X shows up.
I would agree.
So let's talk about Mr. X for a second, because this is something that I felt like Nemesis could have been done better with Resident Evil 3. But in RE2, he is done perfectly. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the original Resident Evil 2, he's very scripted. He shows up in a couple of times. Once you take him out, he falls down, and that's it. That is not the case here. He wanders around the police station. Those footsteps are menacing as hell. What was your first reaction when you encountered this bad boy?
Raw fear. When he lifted that chopper up, that was one of the best intros for any antagonist ever. Like in any game, that intro was so well done. The entire handling of Mr. X
up that helicopter.
It just stares at you. Oh my god! And Leon and Claire's reaction is so good to it as well. I'm pretty sure both of them just end up saying, "What the fuck?" Such a good reaction. But yeah, no, the way they handled Mr. X was perfect. He was like the absolute perfect stalker enemy. Imposing, doesn't get in the way to the point of being annoying and like game breaking, but gets in the way enough to halt you and like make you rethink your strategies and stuff. You can put him down, but only temporarily, gets back up. Just done so well. It builds the tension so much when you hear those footsteps. Like, for example, the bit where you're moving all the bookcases and you start hearing those footsteps coming closer and closer and closer and closer. It's so terrifying, especially when you can't see it behind you and you don't know how close he is to you. It's, the tension that builds is immaculate. It's handled so well. So well.
It is handled very well, and I got to tell you, what took me off guard was the fact that you couldn't put him down semi-permanently when you actually engage with him in battle, because I didn't realize he could get back up. Yeah. And so I would take my sweet time, in the sections, like, for example, I didn't realize he could come back into the the main hall for the police station.
Oh yeah, he'll follow you.
Oh, yes, he will. Keep in mind, this was a safe haven in the original Resident Evil 2. Nothing would follow you in there. But in this one, he shows up, I think it's the second encounter you have with him is Leon. And he shows up on the bottom floor and just starts charging up at you from the stairs. And, oh my God, so I put him down, and I went to grab a few items, and he got back up. And I'm like, I have no ammo. Oh my God.
You wasted it
And
all
then-
putting him down thinking that was it, and then all of a sudden he just gets back up, readjusts his fedora, and starts walking again.
Now, does he get more aggressive if you shoot off his hat?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure he's always as aggressive as he is, just he's always very aggressive. he
I like
always
the
just
hat as
relentlessly
an
pursues you.
addition. It was very nice. It was... It
Yeah,
looks like
yeah.
he should have been on the show The Blacklist.
Yes! He looks like, what's his name? The dude that played Robert California in The Office. What's his character
James
name in
Spader.
Blacklist? Yes, James Spader. There you go. He looks like, I know what you mean, with the black overcoat, the fedora, the boots. Yes.
He is all set to go. And he does follow you throughout the most of the sections for the police. If you play as Leon, this is where I feel like it is the better campaign because he follows you a lot longer
Yeah. I agree.
than is Claire,
agree.
because Claire, it stops at the police station. He follows you one more time when you're about to approach the sewer. And then, sorry for this spoiler, guys. It's been out for...
It's been out for over a year
now. So,
Yeah.
but Mr. Birkin kills him if you play as Claire.
Yeah.
And then he's done and over with. But if you play as Leon, he follows you up all the way until you reach the lab.
That Birkin death was pretty gruesome as well. Just tears him in half with his claws. Right
Oh my
in front of
God.
Sherry as well. Like right in front of Sherry.
That was definitely an epic moment. I will say that because, you know, in the original Resident Evil 2, that battle never took place. I'd always wanted to see a battle between Birkin and Mr. X. And we saw how that turned out. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was quite one-sided, wasn't it?
It was very one-sided. I felt kind of bad for Mr. X right there. So, I want to talk about the section that, to me, caused the biggest issue, and that was the prison sequence.
Oh god, yeah. When he shows up there, that was like, oh god. There's the horde of zombies, and you think you can get through them, and then he shows up as well.
That took some time with me because, and now I didn't realize the first time around that you could actually go around that area.
Yeah, same. I just tried running straight through it.
I tried that as well, and then so you start shooting off all these zombies. About a dozen of them show up, and as you get to the end of the horde, Mr. X shows up too, and I'm just kind of like, I'm out of ammo right now, and I'm getting bitten. And of course, if you didn't see this before, if you get pushed down by a zombie, he will actually stomp on your face.
Oh yeah, gives you the old curb stomp.
And that was one of the things that really took me off guard. You know, in the original Resident Evil 2, when Mr. X showed up, it was just him.
Yeah.
But in this game, you can be fighting off Mr. X, you can be fighting off zombies at the same time, even lickers show up.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure there's a few cases where lickers, especially, I think it's like towards the end of the RPD section, there are lickers and Mr. X at the same time. That is not a nice combo.
No, it is not. And I wanted to ask you how you felt about how the lickers were handled in this game, because I thought they were handled extremely well.
Yeah.
The fact that they're blind and that you can tiptoe around them, even though that never worked for me, because I'd always accidentally stride into a run. And of course, they'd hear me right away. And of course, you hear this.
Yeah, no, I loved them. I thought they were done, again, amazingly. The fact they can like hide on the roof and stuff and you won't even see them, it's just the terror factor of them was fantastic. The fact that you could creep around them made them even scarier to me, because like there are a few times when I was doing a hardcore run and I was really low on ammo, so I tried to sneak around one. I got like, I think it was just outside the STARS office. I got just around the back of it and then walked a bit too fast, made a footstep sound, and like it was one of those almost perfect horror movie moments where like the protagonist does something they shouldn't and they're like, oh shit, and then the licker just goes and jumps on you. Oh my god. The lickers again were done I wouldn't change anything about them. They were done perfectly. They had their weak spots. You shoot them in the brain, and obviously they go down faster. They're killable, but they're hyper lethal. They are creepy. They can be avoided if done perfectly. If not, then you're in for a pretty gruesome end. But no, they were done perfectly, just like Mr. X.
Actually, there's this theory that if you shoot him in the ass, I kid you not, it's actually effective.
Really?
Have you ever tried that?
I can honestly say that I've never tried that, but now I really want to.
I don't know if I'd want to look at a licker's ass that long, to be
No,
honest with you.
I think if you're on the backside of it, you kind of just want to run. You just want to get out of there.
Get out of there as fast as you can. Now, we talked about the lickers a little bit. How did you feel about the lack of monsters in the campaign, or variety of monsters, compared to Resident Evil 3? That was, to me, the only real drawback.
Yeah, after they cut obviously the moth, the spiders, and Plant 43, I was kind of worried they'd completely cut anything like that from Resident Evil 3, and thankfully they didn't. But still, it would have been cool to see the spiders. I loved the spiders in RE1. They were really cool. They were kind of easy, but they were still really cool.
The spiders.
Yeah, spiders, the moth, Plant 43, well, that's more of a boss type thing. But no, I feel like it could have done with more monsters, but at the same time, I do get why they cut them. I feel like they were going for like a pure, like, raw horror vibe as opposed to more of like a fantastical horror vibe. Because when you start throwing in like zombie plants, although we did kind of get that at the same time, but in a bit of a different faction, a bit of a different fashion. But when you start throwing in like monster moths and like massive spiders, I feel like you do get more towards like fantastical horror as opposed to just like raw gritty horror, and it tried to stay in line with that. I mean, I think even the changes that they made, we'll touch on this later on, but the changes that they made to Plant 43 were quite in line with that as well. The Ivies were a lot more gritty than fighting a big plant. So I feel like that's probably why they cut them. And honestly, as much as I would have liked to have seen them in the game, or, I mean, hell, even in like a DLC or something at the least, I get why they cut them.
I wonder if modders will actually correct that a little bit, because the sewers felt a little bit empty. I mean, they had the new, I think they call them G's.
Oh, the alligator. Oh,
Well, they have the alligator too.
The G infected, yeah, the big ones.
So they did have those. So we're moving on to the sewer now. The sewer was interesting for me, because it was if you remember from the original Resident Evil 2, it was a pretty linear thing. You went through the sewer, you fought a couple of spiders, and then you were in the marshalling yard.
Yeah.
Here, they actually had a 3-tier sewer section. And I'm not going to lie to you. I got so
I'm not sure what I
lost
think about
the
this,
first
because
time
sewer
around.
sections in games to me.
It took me a good, I'd say 2 hours to get my bearings, to figure out where I was, to figure out what to do. And I loved it. I love the fact that they took something that was such a small portion of the original game and made it a full-blown section that you actually had to take your time, explore, find the puzzle pieces, and then move on. What was your take on the sewer section?
For me, the G infected kind of slowed it down a little bit, because getting around them, I didn't dislike them, and I don't think they're bad by any means. I think they just kind of halted the pace a little bit and got in the way, because like there are certain areas where I had very, very little ammo, and there was a G infected right there, and there was no getting around it. I couldn't just walk around it or try and dodge it, because every time like you tried to walk around it, the area was too narrow and it'd pick you up. That said, though, the chess piece puzzle was really cool. The exploring the entire area and getting a spark gun was really cool as well. I didn't hate it. It's just sewer areas for me are like, you know how some people hate water levels? Well, for me, it's sewer levels. Sewer levels for me are just like, I don't know. I don't hate them, but they sort of start to get boring for me after a while. I will say RE2s didn't, but it wasn't particularly far off towards the end. I was very happy to get out of the sewers at the end. Let's put it that way.
I don't blame you there. I have to ask you, since we brought up the sewers, there's a section in both Leon and Claire's campaign where you play as alternate characters. Now, of course, in Leon's campaign, you play as Ada. Yeah. And you have a cool little hacker device. As Claire, you play as Sherry, I believe her name is?
Yeah, Sherry.
And you're in the orphanage. So, what was your take on, first of all, let's talk about the Ada segment there, because for the first time around, that was pretty challenging for me, especially since Mr. X is there.
Dude, that first Mr. X section, I got stuck on that for like 15 deaths. I had no idea where to go, where you had to hack that fan. I was walking around in that room trying to shoot him and put him down, thinking like, maybe I need to put him down and then a cutscene starts or something. But nope, Right, yeah, so the Ada section, Mr. X gave me an absolute nightmare in that first section. I had no idea that you had to hack the fan. I was just running around in circles around those barrels in the middle. Thinking, like, I don't know, I had to put him down or something and then a cutscene would start. But no, the Ada section, I really, really enjoyed, actually. At first, when I started playing as, I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I'm not sure what I'll think of this, but I ended up really, really liking it. It was maybe a bit too short for me, and the ending of it was kind of a bit too linear. I would have liked to maybe play this a bit more, but I enjoyed it. The Sherry one was, again, I actually got stuck on the Sherry one for quite a bit the first time that I did it, where you have to run upstairs and hide in that playroom. I went under this one table or something, and like I wasn't quite underneath it enough, and I thought I was, and like 5 or 10 times in a row, I got taken out by irons. But no, that section was good. That was definitely a lot tenser than the Ada section. Hiding under the table when I eventually got it right was so tense. Like when Irons walks past you and then like goes into that room and then you try and get out behind him and you know that he's behind you. Oh my god, that was terrifying. I think
he is a creepy guy.
Yeah, dude, weird guy. Very weird guy.
Especially when he says, door's locked. I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah. When you try and go for the door and you hear him say that, it's like, oh god, where do we go now?
So that was excellent. I will say that, yeah, you're right. It did. Which one did you think was more tough? The Ada section or the Sherry section?
Definitely Sherry. Definitely Sherry.
Because you have no weapons at all. There's nothing you can do except just run.
Yeah, exactly.
I did have a hard time in one of the Ada bits, though. When you're in that second area, you have very limited ammo, but there's like half a dozen zombies. One of them actually falls from the ceiling.
Yes, yeah. That was difficult for me as well. Was that the section where you have to get the elevator on and you have to go up that little elevator? Yes, yeah, okay, I know what you mean. I wasn't sure at first with that. I got lost in there. I thought I had like a grappling hook or something, because obviously Ada normally has a grappling hook. I thought I had to like grappling hook over a wall or something. I don't know why I thought that, because the game never told you about a grappling hook, but for some reason I was adamant that she had one still. But no, that section, I got stuck there quite a bit as well.
Oh, yeah, that definitely took me off guard, because you have such limited ammo. And so you have to pick and choose your battles very carefully there.
Yeah, they definitely went for more of like a survival horror vibe there than normal.
They definitely did, but it was good seeing Ava's perspective as well as Ada's perspective, as well as Sherry's, just to see what they were going through, and it adds a little bit of character development for both those characters.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was cool to see what they were going through. I'm happy that the Sherry one wasn't any longer, because I don't know. I feel like it's Resident Evil. I want a gun, you know. I want to shoot stuff. But no, they were definitely welcome sections. I enjoyed them, and it seems to be a trend that they're doing now with remakes. I mean, kind of not really, because Resident Evil 3 had it anyway, but they seem to like doing them.
They do, for sure. All right, so let's get along to the third act of this game. This is when we're in the nest.
Yes.
And now, if you play as Leon, Mr. X is here. Now, for me, this was an interesting section because you also have to fight the plant monsters in addition to the zombies. And these plant monsters are no pushovers either. No, they actually take a bit of doing. Now, did you try to run around these guys, or did you try to actually douse them?
My entire first playthrough, I tried to kill all of them, and realized that you couldn't actually kill them unless you had the flamethrower. Can I just say as well, the Ivies, the design for them, like the visual design and also the sound design, was absolutely terrifying. The sound they make when you shoot them, when they go like, ah, like, oh my god, creepy as hell. It was definitely not like that sound that I just made. But there you go. That's more like it. That's more like it. They were creepy though. They were really creepy. Yeah, the Ivies, I tried to kill them at first and realized quite quickly that I wasn't going to do that unless I had a flamethrower. Did
the antidote puzzle get you stuck at all?
Not really. You mean, do you mean the specific section where you have to sort of like balance out the antidote and create it?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm actually typically kind of good at those puzzles in games. Like the one in, I mean, the one
lucky
in.
you.
Yeah, I know. I am lucky in that sense. There is one puzzle that I'm really bad at, and there's one in RE4. You know, there's ones where there's like a puzzle of like a grid of like 9 boxes, but one's missing, and you have to move them around and create a picture. I am awful. I hate any game that has those puzzles in. I don't even try and do them. I just search for the answer on Google. Like I just don't. I don't have the patience. I do not have the patience. But
that
no,
was me with the antidote segment. I had to search it up first because I couldn't figure out what to like. The first time I did it, I got lucky.
Oh, okay.
But when I was going through on my full campaign and cutscene speed run, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to pull that off a second time.
Yeah.
So I looked it up, and I still screwed it up, dude. Like, if you go back and look at my full campaign and cutscenes run, it still took me a few tries to actually get it right. And fortunately, it wasn't too long, so hopefully it wasn't too boring for the people watching. But, oh my God, I was so frustrated.
Yeah, I can imagine, because that's one of those puzzles where, like, if you don't get it, then it takes a long time to fully understand it. Like those puzzle ones that I hate. I just can't grasp them. And like any puzzle in a game that's like that, it gets really frustrating, but the payoff is just how satisfying it is when you finally finish it. And even though like I can do those ones pretty easily, it was still so satisfying to do it and get it done.
Oh my gosh, I was sitting there the entire time like, man, I hate chemistry.
Dude, I was the same. I got rid of that subject in school as fast as I could, so I understand you right there.
Oh yes. Now, one of the key differences between Leon and Claire's campaign here is that Mr. X is actually following you around at this stage of the game still, because as you guys know, the main antagonist for Leon's campaign is Mr. X versus Birkin for Claire's campaign.
Yep.
Now, again, you can avoid him for the most part, but all right, I got stuck in this area personally when you were actually in the plant section.
When you go and get the key card and then he shows up.
And then he shows up, and there's still like 2 or 3 other plant monsters there. How did you fare the first time around there?
I learned to favor flashbangs. I learned that flashbangs are my best friend. That section was hard. I didn't try and put him down or kill any of them. I just tried to run past them all. And get back. So I knew that, so you know when you leave the plant room and then you go through that one little lab section where there's loads of vines and there's 2 ivies and then you get past them into the presentation room and then you're clear. I knew that as soon as I got into that presentation room, I was clear. I was good to go. So I was like, right, I'm not wasting any ammo. I'm just running. I just barreled it past them all.
You were definitely smarter than I was because I tried to take him out with Mr. X right behind me, and of course I got curb stomped again.
Oh, no.
Oh, it happens. It definitely happens. But I learned from it. You know, again, I watched someone else play through, and I was like, okay, so you can technically run around these guys.
Yeah.
And I went from there. So, yes, I did cheat a little bit there when I was doing my full campaign and cutscenes run because I wanted to see the more efficient routes to take.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be... And that's sort of the thing that I want to talk about here as well is... The campaigns for both are actually relatively short. You can beat them in under an hour.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, that is with like absolute speedrunning strats, like aim flicking on the stairs and stuff. But still, they are short.
They are short, but when you put them together, it actually makes a pretty lengthy campaign.
Yeah. I mean, as well, Resident Evil campaigns, at least pre-4, were always kind of short anyway. Like, they were always meant to be more replayable, which is why things like A and B scenarios exist. So, like, you replay them and, like, there's an incentive to actually replay them and go through to the end again. So, like, I do find that when people complain about them being, like, really short, it's like, well, the originals were kind of short as well. But I don't know.
It worked for the originals because I felt like they were trying to be a bit more cinematic with the tank controls.
Yeah, I see that.
And I felt like it worked here too, just because there were a lot of cutscenes. There's actually about an hour's worth of cutscenes. So if you look at my full campaign and cutscene video, it's about, I want to say it's about 2.5 hours long, something like that. But most of that is actually cutscenes.
Yeah.
And they did an excellent job with that.
Yeah, the remake, I feel like the remake went for more of a cinematic approach, personally. That's the same goes for both remakes. They really tried to make them as cinematic and sort of narrative-driven as possible, whereas before they were... I don't know how to describe this without sounding bad, and I don't mean it in this way. The originals were more fun and gameplay-focused, whereas the new ones seem to have more of a focus on creating like a cinematic narrative experience, sort of like, obviously not similar, but in a similar vein at least, to like a lot of modern games, I don't know, God of War and all those other games that are like very, very narrative driven and very story focused. I feel like that's what these
Final Fantasy VII.
Yes, yeah, exactly, like that. I feel like they've gone for that similar approach, which I like personally, because the game's still really, really fun. There's just also a really, really, really well-told narrative to go with it now. Like, obviously, the narratives in the original games were great as well, but they haven't aged particularly well. At least the presentation of them hasn't. Whereas with the new ones, I feel like they'll age very well. That's just personal preference, though.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you there. I have to ask you this. The final boss battles for Leon and Claire, which one was more challenging for you? Fighting Mr. X or fighting Birkin?
It depends what difficulty. That Birkin fight, for me, on normal was harder than Mr. X, but on hardcore, the Mr. X one was so much harder for me. I found that so much harder. As soon as I learned that you can just knife Birkin, like just stand near him and like knife the floor and hit him and burst all of his blisters, it's kind of easy. Whereas Mr. X is a lot harder to do that because he has this one attack where he sort of like almost like thrusts across the floor, like glides across the floor, and it's really, really hard to dodge, especially if you're staying in melee range. So I thought I'd probably say overall Mr. X was harder.
Mr. X, see, for me it was Birkin because he kept climbing up the walls and then pouncing on me.
Oh yeah.
And that would instantly drain my health right there. I mean, Mr. X, I mean, keep in mind I had the chain gun at this point, so at that point, like I could just keep him back. I could keep him at bay. And that's all you have to do is for a certain amount of time, just keep him back, and then you're fine, because you can't actually beat him.
Yeah.
Whereas Birkin, you get the chain gun as well, but he's everywhere. He reminds me a little bit of Nemesis when he was running around the arena.
I was going to say, I thought that as well, because he does climb the walls a lot and jump on you, like stare at you from the top of the wall and then jump on you and then chase you on the floor. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so we've gotten through the 3 acts of this game. I've got 2 more questions for you, HiddenXperia. The first is this. What was your least favorite part of the game?
Are we talking like least favorite section or thing overall?
Overall.
I would say the lack of differences between Claire and Leon's campaign. I would have preferred their campaigns to be different and not just be like basic retellings of the same story, but just with different protagonists. I would have liked them to be more different, with actual different puzzles, different enemy encounters, different narrative beats and stuff. I would have probably... Yeah, that's probably my least favorite aspect of the entire game. That and one other thing. I have 2 things, actually. I'm going to cheat here and I'm going to say 2 things.
Go for it.
I also am not the biggest fan of the new Nest design. Obviously, in the original, it was really grungy and like industrial and like rusty. Whereas in the new ones, like in obviously Nest 1 and also Nest 2 and RE3, they're almost a bit too sci-fi, a bit too like white and clean and like...
They're very pristine.
Sci-fi lab. Yeah, very pristine. Yeah, and I'm not personally a fan of that. I mean, I do like the approach that we're going for, where like the sort of pristine environment contrasts really heavily with like the blood from the zombies and the rotting carcasses on the floor. But I don't know. I feel like overall, especially after just finishing RE1 and seeing the lab beneath the mansion in that game and how rusty and like ancient and worn that felt, I can't help but prefer that aesthetic. So yeah, they're my 2 things. Joint least favorite things.
No, I can't say I blame you there. Actually, I wanted to bring that up too, because in the original Resident Evil 2, Mr. X didn't show up until the second playthrough.
Yeah.
And this one, and that's what really took me off guard, is he shows up the first time around, just lifts that helicopter up like it's a toy, and just beelines it straight for you. And I feel like at the same time, let me ask you this. So I'm gonna cheat here myself and ask a third question.
Fair enough.
This is technically question 2. Would you have preferred that Mr. X showed up in the second campaign and been more of a surprise, or were you fine with it as is?
Having him show up in the second campaign, in the B campaign, would have been great because you would have gone into it expecting like, oh, this is just gonna be the same thing, but like maybe a few more enemies and like maybe a bit of a different ending, which obviously it had. But for him to just like show up then for the first time would have been like, whoa. But at the same time, they did him so well in the remake that I feel like it would have almost done a disservice to him to not have him be in the main game and have him be like a core part of the game as a whole. And then at the same time as well, I feel like they couldn't have marketed the game with any material of him in it if he was only in the B campaign, if he was a surprise left for the B campaign, because then obviously that would have spoiled the surprise. So I'm happy with the way they went. It would have been really cool to have him show up just in B, but I'm happy with the way it went.
Because you had mentioned the differences between Leon and Claire's campaign, and for me in the original Resident Evil 2, that was the major difference. Was Mr. X showing up in the second campaign and just being that additional obstacle that you had to face.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have definitely spiced it up.
All right, so now I'm going to ask you, what was your favorite part of the Resident Evil 2 game?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to cheat again.
Go for it. That's what this video is about.
I love this game way too much to give one. I'd say the first thing is, again, like what I said for RE3, the voice acting, the mocap acting, the narrative was unbelievably good. RE2, I think, still has the best voice acting in the entire gaming industry, in any game I've ever played. Like, even better than RE3. RE3 was absolutely spectacular, but RE2's was incredible. Like, even the smaller characters, like Marvin's voice acting was absolutely incredible. Iron's was incredible, Ada's was incredible, Birkin's, Annette's, all so good. So yeah, I'd say that, and also with that goes character design as well. The characters were designed, again, amazingly. Leon and Claire look so good. And then my second favorite thing is the fact that it resurrected, or it helped resurrect Resident Evil after RE6. RE2 Remake and RE7 worked together to bring this franchise back from, like, the pits of despair after RE6, which we're not going to talk about in this video.
Nope.
The way that it brought back Resident Evil in its, and as well, like, it brought it back in its truest form, or not quite its truest form, but as close to its truest form as it probably could have been. Resident Evil 2 feels like a very classic Resident Evil game, and yet it sold like 6 or 7 million copies now, I think. It's still selling like an immense amount. It's resurrected Resident Evil along with RE7. It spawned RE3 Remake and now RE4 Remake, which again is a bit tentative, but we'll see. But yeah, the game overall, my game of the decade. Top 3 favorite games of all time: Halo 2, MGS2, and RE2. Just incredible. Awesome, insanely good remake. The best remake ever, better than Halo 2 Anniversary. Yes, I said it. Yeah, I love this.
I don't think there's a contest there. No, and I agree with you entirely. It's one of my favorite remakes of all time. Obviously, again, my game of the year for 2019. And I am looking forward to seeing what they do next. I am still hoping that they do Code Veronica.
Oh, dude, my fingers are crossed right now. Really, really tightly crossed.
I can definitely see it as either DLC or its own game, but I hope they do it. Capcom, if you're listening, get on that shit.
Please, Capcom. Please. Please.
Well, that wraps up our video for today. I want to thank HiddenXperia for being on, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy day to sit down and watch this video. I really do hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, I hope you consider subscribing for more great content right here on the channel. Don't forget to stay tuned next week where we'll be discussing the remake of the original Resident Evil.
Hell yeah.
And I can't wait to discuss that with you, HiddenXperia.
Me too, dude. I'm looking forward to it. Considering what I told you about this before we started recording, about my thoughts in this game, I am ready.
All right, we're going to do this. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you all right back here next time. And as always, I'm the Tyrant, signing off.
Later.